It seems like every photo sharing app has a bazillion filters these days, with a lot of them aimed at recreating the old-timey look of Kodachrome film. Snap a picture, apply the filter, boom, retro photo for free. And then there's the Fuji X100T, a camera that offers the same feature for $1,000. At least that's how I understood it until I picked it up. In this week's Tech I Want review, I want to understand why professional and amateur photographers flock to the retro looks of the Fuji X100T. And if there's more beneath the surface. Let's find out. When buying a camera, there are dozens of specs to look at. Megapixels, sensor size, ISO, frame rate, chroma subsampling, bit rate. But as much as tech plays a role in defining the best camera, the whole Canon versus Nikon versus Sony versus Fuji war just comes down to one thing at the end of the day: an emotional connection with the camera. Aww. How it feels in your hands, how it looks, and how the art you can produce with it matches the world you see in your mind. And Fuji really nails this. While other camera manufacturers look for ways to constantly increase their specs and make a more futuristic, technology-advanced device, Fuji has hunkered down on its retro style and added only the minimal features that would build on that experience. Compared to much of its mirrorless competition, this Fuji X100T is a fixed lens mirrorless camera. So right off the bat, there's no option to switch lenses, zoom, or anything else. The only way to change the composition is for you to move around the room. And while this may seem limiting at first, photographers will tell you that there is a certain joy in having to physically move around the scene to capture the perfect shot. The 23mm lens, a 35mm full frame equivalent, is perfect for street photography and portraits, and even on my other cameras is a lens I always reach for. The fixed lens, paired with the smaller camera body, also meant that I was getting less stares when taking pictures around my city. You know the feeling. You're traveling with your camera and you really want to take a picture of something, but know that the moment you get that bulky camera out of your bag, all eyes are going to be right on you. So you doubt your decision and just leave the camera in your bag. You'll get the shot next time. But there usually is no next time. No? Just me? The Fuji is the exact opposite. The undercover photographer's camera that no one will give a second glance. The 3-inch screen on the back here is pretty basic, especially if you're coming from a more high-end Sony or Canon camera. There's no touch controls, it doesn't swivel or flip, and in general I find myself not using it too much, due to the slight lag it experiences when doing anything. But here's the secret sauce. While essentially every other mirrorless camera on the market has an electronic viewfinder, which is essentially just a small screen for your eye, Fuji takes us back to the old days again with their hybrid rangefinder. Look through here and you see the real world, not a digital image. This gives you a feeling unlike any other mirrorless camera. It felt like I was in direct contact with the scene I was shooting. And Fuji have also continued to innovate since the original X100. And now you can augment the existing real world with digital overlays. Press this button and you get your camera settings overlaid over your image. Press this other one, it switches completely to digital screen so that you can see your image with your color settings applied to it already. Press it again and you get two images. One, the real world rangefinder through here, and the other a digital zoomed in version of what the lens is actually seeing. Because as the astute photographers among you might have noticed, if the viewfinder is up here to the left and your lens is here in the center, eventually the picture you're taking is going to be slightly different to the image you're seeing through the lens. Yup, you're not seeing the same thing. All of your images will suffer from parallax error, as in the actual image you capture slightly at a different angle than what you're seeing. While not noticeable when you're taking a shot of a bigger scene, this became increasingly annoying when I was trying to shoot close-ups and macro shots. And the picture-in-picture mode really helped me double-check that I was actually taking the picture I was imagining. Images are captured on the great X-Trans 2 sensor, a 16-megapixel APS-C considered to be one of the best in the X100 series. For those of you megapixel hunting, searching for full-frame 50-megapixel cameras, the Fuji falls short. But with this camera, I found it's not about all that. Megapixels don't matter if your images don't have soul. That said, image quality is still pretty good. Images are sharp at nearly all distances, even wide open. Although there is some softness when you're shooting f2, something really close up. With the Fuji X100T, you can shoot in JPEG, of course, or if you want more control over your post-production work, you can also shoot in RAW. But if you're like me, just taking pictures of your family holiday, or you want to snap some quick pics around the city, you don't even really need the RAW. I find that although I do enjoy editing RAW files from my Canon and Sony, there's a certain sense of trust that Fuji offers. It has a lot of film simulations or color profiles to choose from that just look good right out of the camera. Among them, my favorite is a classic chrome film simulation. Pretty much a ripoff of the Kodachrome simulation, which in turn simulates the old school vibes of Kodachrome film. You'll recognize it. You know, that classic old school, heavily saturated, inaccurate image that filters everywhere are trying to copy. But that's Fuji for you, always going for that old school look. And after using it for a little bit, you kind of realize that there's this massive difference between Instagram and Fuji filters, even though you can achieve pretty much the exact same look. With the Fuji X100T, you see the image with a filter applied already, so you're forced to work with what you have and make the best out of it. Whereas on Instagram, you just kind of take a photo and then you can do anything with it in post. In this sense, it's more romantic to shoot on the Fuji, because it really challenges you to, chase and find that perfect composition. But, of course, you still want to share your mad pics on Instagram, right? Well, Fuji thought of that too. The X100T has built-in Wi-Fi that pairs with the Fuji Camera Remote app on Android or iOS. This not only lets you remote control your Fuji camera, using your phone as a display to be able to capture the perfect selfie, but also lets you quickly import pictures to your phone. But I know what you're thinking. We've left out the most obvious thing. What about all these knobs, buttons? Because at the end of the day, Fuji really went with their retro look. Not only with the picture style, but also with the camera form. At the top here, we've got the shutter speed and exposure compensation dials, which are cool and retro. But in using it, it's an acquired taste. I was used to just spinning a dial like this one here to change the shutter speed on my Canon or Sony cameras. Here I feel like I need to continuously be checking to see if it's in the right physical location. And if you want to control the aperture or focus, you've got them on rings here on the fixed lens. I'm used to, again, spinning a dial with my thumb to control the aperture, so this took some getting used to. And due to the small size of the lens, I did find myself screwing with the focus while I tried to adjust the aperture with my chubby fingers. The aperture ring can be controlled in third steps of an f-stop, rather than the previous model's hold stops, and it clicks into place with each step. Coupled with auto ISO in manual mode, you just choose your shutter speed, aperture, and image brightness, and let X100T figure it out. Another genius move by Fuji in this version was to finally give more freedom with their button customizability, refining the X100T's overall usability. There are 7 customizable buttons, function one there, and then these 5 directional buttons, which can all be assigned to something separately. Add to that the Q menu, a special quick menu where you can store 16 of your 30 most used settings, and you're ready to go. Once you get a hang of what button you've assigned each of your settings to, this makes it super easy and fast to use. Because as a street photographer, it's really important to be able to just take photos really fast in some situations. With a heavy setup, this might take ages of faffing with the controls, changing the lens, and doing all this other stuff. The Fuji lets you just lift and snap. That's it. Personally, the best use I've found so far for these buttons are the ISO settings and the dynamic range, and then either the built-in ND filter or the macro mode, depending on what I was shooting that day. And if you have a Fuji, please let me know how you set up your customizable buttons in the comments. I'm sure there's a better layout than what I'm using currently. So I know the Fuji fans are probably thinking, wow, this is an awesome camera. Fuji, you've outdone yourselves. But for the rest of us, I'm sure we're all thinking that's a lot of limitations for a $1,000 camera. The autofocus is pretty fast, but it suffers in low light environments, often breathing in search of the subject. And it has face detection, sure, but it's not as solid as competitors' eye detection. Good enough for a quick shot of someone at a distance, but if you're shooting full open close-ups, you'll find yourself often swearing at its slow speed. It's also not as responsive as we'd expect of a modern camera. The menus often lag, and sometimes I'll press a button and wait for something to happen only to realize it chose to ignore me. There's also no GPS, and the body isn't weather sealed. So if you're planning on shooting out in the rain, you better get the weather sealed X100V. It's also, and this is probably the major flaw, horrible for video. Shooting poorly and only up to 1080p at 60 frames per second without any stabilization or swivel screen. Obviously you can't switch the lenses either, so if you're a vlogger, this definitely isn't your camera. But my biggest complaint is the battery. Fuji took the retro style a little too far when they opted to use the NP95, first introduced in 2006. Because of this, on a single charge, the most I was able to shoot was 322 shots, which wouldn't be a problem if I could change out the battery. But I got this pretty sweet leather case on AliExpress, and it makes changing out the battery a true hassle that I'd rather not go through. If you like this video so far, please hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. We come out with tech reviews like this every week, so if you hit that bell, you'll get a notification right to your inbox. Then again, if their competition are retro cameras, I guess that's a step up from the 36 shots offered by 35mm film cartridges. And yet, with all this said, the camera just feels great. In a lot of aspects, for pure photography, this little Fuji gives mirrorless cameras like the Sony A7 a run for their money. Sure, it has less resolution, you can't change the lens, and there are all of these quirks of the old school design. But it's just fun to use. You don't feel like a pro scientist or something when snapping a quick urban photograph. It's more intimate, natural, and you avoid all those stares of people on the street. When it first came out, the X100T was pretty pricey for what it was. At $1,300, it was in the price range of cameras like the Canon EOS RP or the Sony Alpha 6400. But now you can get it for under $1,000 new if you hunt for a deal on Amazon, or even as low as $600 if you're okay with getting it secondhand. And something that the Fuji X100T reminded me of is that using a camera should be fun, and this camera is. I have a friend that carries a ton of gear with him wherever we go, up into the mountains, down into the valleys. It always seems to be getting in the way. The X100T is the opposite. It doesn't get in the way and lets you experience the world firsthand, be in the moment, and capture those moments as you see them. And you know what? I'm gonna go be in that moment and snap some pics. Till next time, I'm Dan, and this was Tech I Want.